Oh,
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us. I am Julie Fairhurst, and this is another episode of Women Like Me Stories in Business. And today, I am excited to have this conversation. We are going to have a conversation with April Vance. So, thank you so much, April, for being willing to be here and chat with us today.
well, thank you for having me, Julie. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. So, if you just you listeners and watchers out there, make sure that you hang on because this is going to be a really good conversation. I know it. So you're going to really want to hear this one. So April, let's start by why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I am a mother and a grandmother. I'm a mother because of adoption, which is a wonderful thing that happened in my life. And I also got to become a grandmother. And I have two children that are all grown up now. And I've been divorced and um, I've had a number of relationships in my life, but I find myself at this particular time very, very happy and in another great relationship. And also, I grew up in the church and I was actually born into the church. So I was 7 days old the first time I went to church. And I found myself completely immersed in it. I grew up married very young. I married at 19. I married a man who was going to Bible college to become a pastor. My dad was a pastor. His dad was a pastor. I was in the church for decades and loved it, actually loved so many things about it. And then as I grew older and I began to really always want to heal my mind and heal my soul. I had, come to believe all the things that were in my church, but I was finding that those beliefs weren't really helping me the way they claimed to help people. And so I really was on a journey to find the things that worked for me. And I found myself really reconnecting with my own heart and connecting with my body as well, and my intellect and my sexuality and all the things besides spirituality that had been emphasized in my life. I found a journey of healing from sexual abuse when I was a little girl, and also just an opportunity to be my most authentic self, which when you're born into something and you grow up in it, you don't know what's different. So you're not sure what's authentically you and what's something else or someone else.
That I love that you said that because it's so true. We and part and I and the part of that I really loved is, you're growing up in your parents' beliefs
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even your, I don't know, but your grandparents' beliefs. And so sometimes, quite often, it we have to step back and say, why do I believe what I believe? Do I really believe it? Or am I believing it because this is what I was taught to believe?
Mm-hmm. And I was an avid studier of the Bible. Like I taught Bible classes. I taught Sunday school. I loved the teaching part. Um, but then after a while, it just was not adding up for me. And it's not like the Bible's bad or church is bad or anything like that. I mean, it can be a high control group. But what I found that it wasn't making the difference that it claimed to make. And so I actually prayed and I said, God, I just can't read the Bible anymore. I don't know what's wrong. I need something more. And so a friend of mine recommended a book, The Language of Letting Go by Melody Beattie. And that book really taught me how to take care of myself, how to set boundaries, how to not just react to things, but really to respond in ways that were authentic. It really taught me the essentials of self-care, which I had always been in a place where I was like giving all the time and not really taking care of me.
Well,
And
you were saying that your father was a pastor as well, right? And then you married a fellow who ended up being a pastor. And so the giving part, I mean, that's what they do. Give to their congregations, right?
yes, and there was always uh, I don't even know why it is, but it's a thing that there's the pastor's wife. And I that's what I was. That's who I was. That's who I strongly identified as. And people told me, "Oh, April, you're so good at it," you know. And but I was so good at being a pastor's wife that I wasn't really being good at being April. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would, there was also parts of my marriage that was not good. And I was, you know, there was arguing all the time and I wasn't happy. And, you know, and then I would turn around and I would go to church and I would just, you know, try to be good and try to, you know, play the piano well and all the things that, you know, that I had embraced and loved doing too. But the inside the parts of me where it wasn't working anymore for me. And then as my kids grew up, my kids left home and started to have their own families. Then I was left with, I still had a job, but I was left in a marriage where there wasn't really, there were no more kids and there was not really a relationship anymore either. And so at the end of the day, you know, we parted. Actually, I left, to be perfectly honest. I was the one who left. And, but I do remember, you know, like I remember praying and just asking God, like, where are you in all of this? And you know, I felt I had sort of an epiphany where I felt like God was with me and understanding me, but also God was with him and understanding him as well, and loving unconditionally the same way I was loved unconditionally. And it kind of helped me to take those steps that I needed to in order to take care of myself, which was to leave that marriage. And you know, had a rough marriage, had two kids, like by adoption, but had two kids. And I was really afraid at the time that because my marriage had been rough, that I wasn't going to have a relationship with my kids. Mm-hmm. Turns out my kids were amazing. And I do have a great relationship with them. And which is one thing I'm so grateful for, you know.
That's wonderful. Oh, so what was there, like a pivotal moment, like that something that just kind of clicked in your head, that, or was it just that gradual, something doesn't feel right, I'm just not comfortable with this anymore, I'm not happy, like, or was it something that just went click in your head and you thought, you know what, this is just not the life I want anymore?
Well, it was kind of a combination of those things. There were a lot of things that were that led up to this, and a lot of decisions that I made that actually I was kind of repeating history in a way. And I found myself sort of in the same kind of situation again, not so much in a relationship one-on-one, but more in my circumstances of life, where again I was putting my decision making on other people instead of listening to my own heart and following my own heart. Mm-hmm. And at the same time I had started to date. And when I started to date, that was when the church I was in kind of didn't know what to do with me anymore, because I had been a leader in the church. And you know what, I don't hold any hard feelings or anything like that, because you know, back in the day, I would have been in the same boat. I would have, you know, really wondered about this person who was a leader in the church, and now she's dating, and she's divorced, and now she's dating, and it's like she's not kind of following the rules anymore. And they were supportive and behind me right up until they weren't.
Yes.
and and then it was like, okay, it's clear to me it's time for me to move on. And my social life was falling away from me, like, because I had been all in the church, and I all of my social structure was there. And then when I was pulling away, they were pulling away at the same time. And so again, there was another sense of loss, of course, but I couldn't not go. You know what I mean? And I couldn't,
Yeah.
I
Yes.
had to follow my own heart, and I had to follow my own lead. And
Yeah.
even my kids, like around my kids, like I used to think, oh, I'm always going to live in this one particular place because I want to be around my kids and my grandkids. And then I had it. It was like, April, your kids can up and move at any time. They've done it before, and that would be great for them. But are you going to follow them everywhere they go? And no, you need to make decisions that are best for you. So I met a man, and I ended up falling in love, and I moved from Vancouver Island to the Lower Mainland, and I did it for love. And I had a relationship for 9 years, and that really changed my life. And then that ended, and now I'm in a different kind of place. But it's been a journey of being able to know that I am doing the things that are important to me, and I can look myself in the mirror and be happy with the
It must
person.
have been because not only were you leaving a marriage, you were leaving a community. We
Yes.
weren't trying to leave the community, but I get it. You got to move on. And so that's, you weren't just having a divorce from your husband, but you kind of got divorced from your community, your way of life, your friends. It's that is a real fresh start.
Yeah, it is a fresh start, pardon me. But it's also, you have to deal with the grief that comes with the loss.
Yes.
And I think that was I don't know, that's part of the journey that you I went through all the stages. Like, I was really angry. I was trying to be in denial. I was trying to bargain. I was trying to figure it all out. And then, in the end, I just had to go through the process. I
Yeah.
just had to take one day at a time, and learn to trust my own heart, and to make the best decisions that I could, and to just keep moving forward, and to trust that everything was going to work out. And at the time, during the time I was unlearning the things that had sustained me for so long, I was learning all of this new information.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what kept me going, is that I knew that I was going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, I appreciate you sharing that. So thank you, because I think there's a lot of people that maybe it's not church, but maybe it's a work environment, or just a family environment, and
Mhm.
feeling that you were talking about, of not really living their own life or knowing who they are, and having to go through that rediscovery. And that was incredibly hard to leave. That whole, that's a lot. Versus, it's a lot for other people as well, what they're leaving. But yeah, a whole community like that, that's
Mhm.
very courageous of you. And but good for you. You followed your heart, and you knew what you needed to do. And as difficult as it was, you just went and did it. And that's really courageous. And I think, we need to do more of that, especially as women, because we do tend to sometimes give up a lot of ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah, for others, and not that we shouldn't, for our children and those kinds of things, but we can't forget about us, or
Mhm.
we end up unhappy.
That's right. And
Yeah.
I heard a saying once that said, be you, because everybody else is taken,
Yes, I love that. Yeah,
you know.
I love that.
And that's really, really important that you discover who you are. And also like the idea of a belief system. And I heard Wayne Dyer say this once, and it changed my life. He said, beliefs are thoughts with emotions attached. And I thought, well, because when I was growing up, beliefs were like life and death, like dependent on what you believed.
Yeah.
And really that way of thinking, for me, I've discovered is kind of a magical way of thinking, that if you have a certain thought, that will create your eternal destiny. If you have another thought, that will create another kind of eternal, like heaven and hell.
Yes.
And when I realized that I could change my thoughts and I could be more authentic, that then it set me free, like it really did.
Yeah,
I didn't feel like I was chained anymore.
yeah. Oh,
Believe.
you talk about that you were you call yourself the church girl, and you have a podcast called, what's your podcast called again?
It's called Reiki Healer and the Church Girl.
Reiki Healer and the Church Girl.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I will.
Yeah.
We've been doing our podcast now for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in August. And it's with Stephanie Sarens. And Stephanie and we've been friends for, I don't know, pretty close to 15 years now. And we met through my work. I work as a community support person at the time. And her husband was an artist who was a teacher of the person I supported. So I got to go into her home for almost 2 years, once a week for almost 2 years, and got to know her and her husband. And one of the things that Stephanie wanted to do was to have a podcast in celebration of writing affirmations for 10 years. And so we ended up doing that together. And then I also ended up illustrating her book. So the podcast is we're really just two friends who love each other, have very different ways of thinking and very different approaches to the world. But we don't let that get in the way of being friends and continuing as friends and being honest and authentic in that friendship as well. So, and we talk about that in a very kind of relaxed way on our podcast. And we also have guests in, which you should come and be a guest, Julie.
I would be a guest, absolutely.
Yeah. So we have guests in, and we love to hear people's stories. And we also love to share our book, which she's written, called Healing My Heart After a Loss.
Just give me 2 seconds. I actually have that book. So here it is. And it's available on Amazon, and it's great. I love easy reads. Right. And it is just, it's such an easy read. And the affirmations are wonderful, and the artwork. So you can actually color.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great idea. Just a fabulous idea. Yeah. So there it is, if anybody wants to grab it.
Oh, thank you. Yes, the podcast has opened so many great ways of connecting with people and finding out how much we have in common. Really, we have more things in common with each other in the world than we have different. And as a person who left a religious kind of an environment where there was a lot of us and them, like we're saved and we're going to hell and they're not, and all that kind of stuff. And to have such commonality with people has really been a growth experience for me doing the podcast with Stephanie. And I had a friend the other day who said listening to the podcast was like listening to a couple of aunties just chatting and, gaining some information and gaining some wisdom from that. And so we love doing it. We do it totally off the cuff most of the time. And we just, we love talking to each other and sharing what we've learned over the years and how it's helped us. And the
I
books
just,
are,
no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I love what you said earlier in the beginning when you started explaining it about how you and Stephanie, you think differently. You're in
Mhm.
a little bit of different world, but yet you're still good friends, and it doesn't get in the way, and you can chat about that. And I love that, because that's what it's the way it should be. I find so often one wants to convince the other person
Yeah.
that they should be their way or their belief, or, and yeah, why not? We should just be accepting and loving each other for the way we are, and not
Yeah.
trying to change everybody.
Well, and I think that goes back to the whole belief system. If you know that beliefs are not life and death, you can change your thoughts, and you have, what is it, 30,000 thoughts a day or 60,000 thoughts a day that you have absolutely no control over. And if you're always purposely thinking the same thoughts and thinking everybody else has to think the same thoughts as you, then or believe the same way that you do, then that's a very rigid way of living. And then if your eternity, your life or death in eternity depends on you doing that evangelically, then it's a stressful way to live. I'm telling you, it's stressful, and I was never very good at it. So I just really didn't do that very much. But because I learned that if I could be someone's friend and I could find common ground with people, then I would have much more to offer others in friendship than I would in trying to get someone to change their beliefs.
Absolutely. And I personally love connecting with people who are very different from me. And I just want to learn. I want to know, why do you believe what you believe? Like, where did that come from, and what's it all about? I think that it just enriches our life. I was very religious for a short time in my life, and
Mhm.
what I wanted to mention is I remember meeting someone from a different faith, and in my
Mhm.
head I remember saying, "Oh, it's too bad
Yeah,
you know the truth."
yeah,
Like, I had all the truth. But
yes,
that's what I thought. I
yeah.
remember thinking that, and they were probably looking at me thinking, "Oh, we could just get Julie so that she knows the truth." So we're all wandering around thinking that we have, and I remember once years ago, I looked up how many religions there were in Canada, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was like 3,000 or some
Mhm.
big number. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking, they all think they're right.
Yeah,
Everybody thinks they're right.
yeah,
And that's okay, as long, like what you were saying about you and Stephanie, like, she believes what she believes, you believe what you believe, you can converse about that, but you love each other and you appreciate each other, even with your differences.
hmm that's what makes it interesting. Like if we both agreed about everything on the podcast, for example, there would be like no tension. There would be no rub. There would be uh I don't know, we both be nodding and saying, yeah, right, all the time, you know, uh instead of, digging a little deep
Yeah.
and saying, and presenting what's truth for you or for what's right for you, and but also listening to the other person. And like I have to admit that over the last couple of years, podcasting with Stephanie, I've learned so many things. And all the different guests we've had and the different way of looking at things. One of the things that's really interesting to me is sometimes we have people on who are a new age and they have amazing, interesting stories to tell. And I try to be honest, and I would say that's very it's a very interesting story that you're telling me. If I was still a church girl, I'd be saying, wow, that's way out there. I might even attribute it to the devil or something.
Yes.
And but then in the podcast, I would think, well, wait a minute. in the Bible, we believe that, like a donkey talked to a prophet, or we believe that, Jesus walked on the water, and we believe like these sort of miracle stories. And who's to say that people's experiences are not their own miracle stories?
Ah,
And,
yes.
and that it's not important what the stories are. It's important that we're open to being able to tell our story, and that we're open to something a little bit outside of our everyday norm that make a difference in our lives.
Yes, yes. And as I said earlier, it enriches our life
It
to
does.
learn about other people and try to understand why they believe what they believe and where they come from. And
Mhm.
yeah, I just find it all very, very fascinating.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
it.
So let me just look at my questions here. So I've got a few questions that I was going to ask you, but we've actually covered quite a bit of it. Um, what about your artwork that you've got in the book? So are you an artist, or do you just like, how did that happen? And how did you figure out like which pictures to put with which affirmations?
Well, how I started with art was in my 30s. I didn't start drawing until I was in my 30s. And the reason I started drawing in my 30s was because I was in a really, really difficult place in my life. And I thought, if I don't find something to do, I am going to eat my way through this.
Yeah.
And I thought, and it turned out to be like an issue that I had to deal with over a number of years. And when I did that, when I started drawing, I found out I was pretty good at it. And then when Stephanie, she said, I have these affirmations and I really want to work with an artist. And so I said, okay, well, send me an affirmation. I'll see what comes up. So what happens, my process for working with Stephanie is, we've tried it a couple of other different ways, but this is really the way that works. She sends me an affirmation. I read it. I take some time to internalize it, and I look for keywords, and then from there I just draw based on the words that stand out to me, and and I try to make it fit but really it's what's coming up for me personally. So I found the affirmations to be very healing and to be very life-giving to myself. And it's been like being in therapy drawing for her affirmations, and I've really, really appreciated it. Yeah, so and then drawing is like anything. But especially I think art is, we think we can't do it until we do. And then there it is,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And when I was in my 30s, I didn't think I could draw, but the more I practiced it, the more I did it, the more I loved it.
I think that's great again, because again, it's just finding that outlet.
Hmm.
I think I remember you may remember your grandparents, but my grandmother knitting,
Yeah.
knitting,
Yes.
crocheting, and hats and scarves and baby clothes and blankets, and it was just constant that they were something that they were doing. And now, now that I think back on it and listening to you, that was a self-expression for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've been in art groups where it's you bring your paint, bring your knitting, whatever you're working on. We've had people who they've been a photographer and they're doing their own framing, or people who have been doing cross stitch or whatever. Just bring whatever it is that you express, however you express your creativity, and let's do it together as a bit of a community and spend some time together doing that. And yeah, it doesn't matter as long as you find what works for you and you find what fulfills that creative. Like I'm the kind of crafter that I don't craft like every day or even every week. But if I get an idea, it's like, get out of my way. Because I'm gonna gather all my materials and I'm
Yeah.
going to blah 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 blah, blah until it's done.
Yeah.
And then if I like it, I might do it again. But drawing for me was something that just really was something that I loved, and I love illustrating for Stephanie. She's kind of amazing.
Well, I think that that's great. And I think that, I would encourage anybody that's listening out there that, find an outlet.
Mhm.
If you're unhappy and you're not moving on or not moving on right now, or whatever it is that you're doing, or you feel stuck, find some sort of an outlet for yourself. And I love that idea of drawing. As you're talking again, I remember I have a girlfriend who buys those adult coloring books, and
Yeah.
she loves that. She'll just do it for hours and hours. She'll sit and and just color, and that's her. That, I don't know if it's a release or just a mental rest that it gives her, but she
Mhm.
loves it. She enjoys it. And so, yeah, I think it's important. We need something.
Mhm.
We need
That's
something
right.
other than the TV set and the refrigerator.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And when you're doing something in a group, particularly in a group, it uses a different part of your brain. Like when you're talking to other people, you're using a different part of your brain when you're doing the art and when you're visiting. It's like it gives it quite a different perspective than when you're either just visiting or you're just doing art or you're doing art by yourself. And that can be so creative. And I remember just like doing things and not even really thinking too much about it, but just, you know, and then I look back and it's like, oh my gosh, I actually can't believe I did that, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's there, even though we don't think it's there. It is there.
Yes, I agree. I agree. We all have talents, and sometimes they're buried underneath all that stuff that we stuff down inside of ourselves, and don't let it bubble up. And yeah, I mean, again, as we're talking, my husband's grandmother, she started painting in her 70s.
Oh,
I've got
wow.
paintings of hers in my house. Just, and when she passed away, like her whole rec room was full of beautiful paintings, but
Wow.
not until she was in her 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a certain, I don't know, it takes like all the planets have to align or something before it feels right. And then but we should look for that. I think we should look for the new experience, the new way of expressing our own creativity, expressing who we really are.
Yes.
And, whatever that looks like. Sometimes it might be in dance, it might be in a certain kind of like doing yoga or belly dancing or whatever. And whatever makes you feel like it's really you doing it, or it makes you feel like you can't really picture yourself anywhere else at that moment, then that's the real you.
Oh, I got shivers. I got shivers. I love that. Yes, absolutely. And yeah, yeah, as you're talking, of course, my brain just starts to go, and there's so many women I know that aren't, they're just not not doing anything, you know.
Yeah,
And hey, if that makes you happy, and that, then great. But if you're not happy and not doing anything, then
yeah.
pulling out those talents. And I think I think what happens to us too, April, is that you know we're busy with children and raising kids
Mhm.
and marriages and possibly working and juggling all of those things, that we set all those things on the back burner.
Mhm.
For myself, when I hit 40, I had one foot in, where I was doing a bunch of public speaking, a bunch of training in the schools. I was working for the Canadian Red Cross, and I was doing facilitating workshops on dating violence, relationship abuse,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And I loved it, but it wasn't paying much. And so
Oh,
I had one foot in and then one foot in my job. And I sat down and said, oh, as much as I'm going to hate to do this, I got to eat. I'm a single mom. I've got these kids I need to take care of. And so I put that on the back burner.
mhm.
Well, I'm doing it now, just on
Mm.
a different scale. I just, it's come back. So, I would like to just tell people, if there's anything that you set aside because you felt like you needed to for whatever reason, there's no reason you can't bring it back to life.
That's right. And I've worked as a community support worker, and I've moved up into management now. But as a community support worker, in person-centered thinking and person-centered active support, what we do is we listen to what people want, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you have to do exactly that thing, but there will be many, many ways to look at it and still meet the goal of, for example, if someone wanted to, I always wanted to drive a car, but the doors just close in that area. But there's so many things about vehicles. There's so many things about mechanics, so many things about different ways of looking at cars, different sizes of cars, or trucks, or machinery, or art, or whatever, that you can explore all of that and still meet that need and meet that goal, that may not look exactly like driving a car, but it certainly makes the person happy. And the like, I remember there was this one time when I was an educational assistant. There was a time when we were talking about energy, and we were talking about different kinds of energy in the classrooms in elementary school. And there's mechanical energy, and there's physical energy, and there's all these moving parts to things. And so there were a few kids, and I asked the teacher if I could do this one thing with a few of these kids. So I went to another resource teacher, and I said, do you have any like old tape recorders or old radios or anything like that I could have? And so she said, yeah, sure. So I gathered up a bunch of them, and I had about 3 kids, and I said, okay, we're going to take these and we're going to take them all apart, and we're going to talk about what makes the parts move inside of them. Well, this one kid, his face just lit up. He said, this is the best science class I've ever had in my life. And he had a screwdriver, and he was like, unscrewing and taking it apart and looking at it. I mean, just the exploration of something that was a little bit outside of what he knew, but yet it was something that he could get his hands on and he could do, made his face and his whole body like feel alive. And I saw some energy in that kid that I hadn't seen in the classroom. And it's amazing when we kind of open our minds and just explore and see what's out there, see what's connected, even in very, very small ways. We can receive the kind of satisfaction that comes from being our most authentic self. And it's just so important to me to really encourage other people to do that.
Yes, yes. Well, you've probably changed that little fella's life. I swear, sometimes it's just that one little thing.
Yeah.
That sets them off on their journey, and their pattern. So, wouldn't it be fun to find out where he lands?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Well, I want to, before we get ready to close down, I wanted to ask you, because you actually have another book you're not really promoting much these days, and that's what was that book called?
I think it was called The Church Girl.
The Church Girl.
Yeah, and I think it was just some writing that I was quite enjoying doing at the time, and it was kind of around just ideas that I had, and it's still on Amazon, and it's still there. In fact, I think I just ran across it in my own library the other day. And more recently, I've started writing some poetry, and so and I had never really written poetry before much, but I'm really, really enjoying it and feeling quite inspired. And so I think that's kind of another lesson, that even if you try something, you never know what it's going to lead to one day.
Right.
you
Right.
know?
I get, yeah, something, yeah, we just, we don't know. We just try to, my motto these days is, I don't know why this is happening, but I'm going to relax into it
Yeah.
because I just have faith that everything is going to work out for me. And, my path is going to be shown to me, and it's, there might be a bump in the road or two, but I'm going to hang in there. And it just, it took a long time to get to that mindset. but
Yeah.
but it's great to
Yeah.
have it. It's great to have it because it really does lessen my anxiety. And it's like being on an airplane and getting nervous, and I'm like, well, might as well have a glass of wine while I'm sitting here, because if it's going down, there's nothing I can do. So I'm just gonna relax. And I'm sure it'll be 99% I'm gonna be okay. And I'm always okay, you know.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I know it, like, that sounds simplified, but it's that what do you do if you when you can't control things? It's out of your control.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes coming up with those ways of thinking that, sometimes it's just asking the question, what do I need to know in this moment?
Yeah. Yes.
And just getting quiet enough and getting the thought. I'm kind of ADHD, so my mind's going like all the time. And when I allow myself to slow down and just even ask that simple question, then, like, I come up with the answers. I come up with what I need, like I come up with a strategy, or I come up with an idea or a way or a direction on a path that just helps me to keep moving forward. And compared to my old life, where I would always be constantly worried about whether it was God's perfect will, that was like, was I doing God's perfect will, which is really looking for it outside of me instead of inside of me.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that changed, that was kind of huge, that change was looking inside of me, and knowing that I could trust myself, and because my heart is trustworthy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, you have just experienced a very interesting and courageous journey. And I really appreciate you sharing it with everybody. I think, other people may, there might not feel, wherever they feel stuck in the world. It's good to know that, that there is a life outside of that.
Mhm.
You don't have to stay stuck in that situation if you don't want to, and get the courage to be able to move forward. So,
Yeah.
April, is there anything you want to tell my listeners that are out there? Any final words of wisdom? Oh, before you do that, I just want to mention that I'm going to have all of April's contact information in the details section of the podcast or the YouTube video, whichever you're watching. And so if you wanted to reach out to her for any reason at all, maybe you want to be on her podcast, then feel free to go ahead and do that. But all of that will be there for you when we put this up. So that said, any last words of wisdom, April, that you would like to share with our listeners or our viewers?
Well, I think one of the reasons why I reached out to you to be on the podcast was because I really loved the title of your book, Women Like Me. And because that kind of sums up, um, you know, uh, the kind of journey that I've been on. And I wanted to just share that with everybody, that you're not alone, and that there are people out there who have things in common with you that will surprise you and will bless you, and you will love, and they will love you. And whatever the answer is you're looking for, it's going to be there. And it's like my podcast partner Stephanie always says, the universe has got my back, and everything works out for me. And that's the message that I would just love people to walk away with, from even just this brief time we've had together. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate
Oh,
it.
no, I loved it. I loved it. And I believe that everything is working out for
Yes.
me, for all of us. We just got to try to relax into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very much, April, for doing this. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you again soon. Take care.